Hello, souls and demons. I hope you're all feeling quite well right now. Today's story is called There Are No Aliens in Roswell, New Mexico, written by RoseKMorgan. She can be found on Twitter as well as Reddit. So, without further ado, sit back, grip your seats, and enjoy. I think there's something wrong with the door to my room, number 12. I fanned myself with pamphlets pulled from the motel lobby's display. I hadn't read them yet, but there'd be more than enough time for that once I was able to get back into the room. The man behind the counter, a sleepy-eyed fellow who would have been a dead ringer for Nick Cage had his skin been a shade or two lighter, shook his head as he pulled open a drawer. "Apologies, ma'am. My son," he paused, shouting the words so it could be heard outside, "was meant to take a look at it before your arrival. Breakfast is on us tomorrow for the inconvenience." He withdrew a screwdriver set from the drawer. Tools in hand, the man shepherded me out of the reception room, through the parking lot and back to my room. Several minutes of tinkering and cut-off curse words later, not Nick Cage had readjusted the knob. 2 test runs of unlocking it and we were both satisfied. I waved him farewell as I headed in, the door locking behind me. The green, bug-eyed alien head mounted on the wall stared down menacingly at me. I smiled back up at it. After all, I'd chosen the room. Out of all the themed rooms at the motel here in Corona, New Mexico, I had to pick the alien room. They'd always been a love of mine. Aliens, that is, not themed motel rooms. Although, to a point, those too. Growing up in Niagara Falls on the northern side of the border, I'd had an adoration for the cheesiest of tourist traps since the day I could take my first steps. You'd think growing up next door to all manner of cash grabs would have made me resent them, as it did so many of my classmates. You'd have been wrong. I never tired of the bright colors and tacky decorations. My favorite had been a restaurant not too far out from the falls. The building itself was shaped like a pair of flying saucers, and as far as I'd been concerned, it was the coolest place on earth. My parents would confide to me years later that they'd hated the food since the first time we went, but seeing my face light up at the plastic aliens was worth choking down a cold burger, flat Coke, and wilted bouquet of French fries. I'd brought Jim there on our first date. Unlike me, he lived south of the border. He and a group of his friends would travel up to bar hop the falls every other weekend. The drinking age in Canada, you see, is 19. Only 18 at the time, Jim was the designated driver. Being the only 2 sober people in our respective groups of friends, we'd had automatic common ground. By the time 19 rolled around, legal drinking wasn't the topic on either of our minds. We got married that summer. Everyone I knew, parents included, told me it was a mistake. They told me we were rushing it. Things would never pan out, and that marriages at 19 end in divorce. I would have loved to prove them wrong and see how long it would have lasted. I would have loved to look back at age 50 and laugh, Jim by my side, about how everyone had told us we wouldn't make it. A 48-year-old father of 2, coping with his own failing marriage by keeping a bottle of Black Label behind the wheel of his pickup, had seen to it that we didn't. I laid back in the motel bed, not bothering to remove my shoes. I hadn't made a conscious decision to come to Corona. It just felt right. I had no desire to return to my parents, and without Jim there, I couldn't get out of our apartment fast enough. Coming down here just felt like I was meant to do it. We'd always joked about it. "I'll buy you all the obnoxious alien keyrings you can carry," he'd once said, punctuating it with a kiss on the forehead. But now I was alone, and I'd have to buy my own obnoxious keyrings. Though Corona was closer to the fabled crash site than Roswell itself, the latter was where the real action was. The trip to the city was just short of 2 hours, but armed with my free muffin from the reception desk, the drive didn't bother me. I spent the first part of my day visiting the International UFO Museum and Research Center, the real gem of the alien tourism scene. I took the odd photo, but it wasn't long until I put my phone away. Who was I meant to show the pictures to? The bulk of the day wasn't exploring aliens, but art. Roswell had a handful of little galleries that I'd looked up ahead of time. I walked through each in solitude, enjoying everything from pop art UFOs to graceful life drawings. The day ended the way that my love of the extraterrestrial had begun, with a disappointing hamburger. In this case, it was under a set of golden arches, though to its credit, the chain restaurant was shaped like a flying saucer. For McDonald's, it was remarkably empty. I chewed in near silence. By the time I'd made my way out of Roswell, the sun was dipping below the horizon. My driver on the way back wasn't much of a talker. I tried to ask him how long he'd lived in the area and what he thought of it, but he just grunted. The radio buzzed with static that should have been annoying. As the last rays of the sun sank out of view, it was instead hypnotic. For the first time, I understood the value of a white noise machine. "Hey," the voice echoed through the small car, shaking me from my ill-timed nap. "We're here." I paid the driver, tipping 20%, though he hadn't been much in the way of entertainment, and let myself out. Back in my room, my first priority was a shower. I was sticky from a day spent in the summer heat. By the time I was cleaned up, it was only 9 p.m. I'd planned to sleep as soon as I got back to the motel, but after my impromptu cab catnap, I was revitalized. Dressed in an old pair of pajamas and a surprisingly fluffy motel robe, I decided to help myself to a drink from the mini fridge. A beer in one hand and the TV remote in the other, I settled into bed. I flicked between the channels, no idea of what to watch. Reruns of sitcoms, infomercials, and the news didn't appeal to me. I settled on a religious service. Satisfied, I threw the remote onto the bed and picked up the UFO-shaped stress ball I'd purchased earlier in the day. I squished it absent-mindedly as I watched. It was some sort of faith healing. I wasn't religious, but something about so many people getting unreasonably excited about the same thing drew me in. It wasn't a spiritual experience for me, but it was entertaining enough to make my way through 2.5 bottles of a cheap beer I'd never heard of. As the man on screen supposedly rid a 70-year-old grandpa of stage 4 cancer, something twitched in the corner of my vision. Instinctively, I turned. I liked having the natural light shine in on me in the morning, so I left the curtains on my room windows wide open. All that lay on the other side of the window was a void of a parking lot. I squinted to see if there was anything out in the darkness. I could have sworn there was motion just moments previous. By the time I turned back to the screen, I'd missed a wheelchair user gaining the ability to walk. I cursed under my breath for not paying attention at this clearly accurate and not at all misleading, exploitative portrayal of the woman's abilities. As I lifted my beer, another flicker of motion danced at my periphery. This time, I nearly snapped my neck to get a look. For an instant, I saw a man standing there in the darkness. At least, I thought I did. It was nearly impossible to know for sure. The night was darker than ink, and the silhouette I possibly saw was just the same. Seeing a black shape on top of a black field was hard enough at the best of times, let alone seated on the other side of the room several beers in. I couldn't focus my eyes on what I thought I saw. It was all just smooth darkness, uniform as the television screen that sat powered off on the wall across from me. I turned my head from the window back towards the television. I didn't know when the faith healer had been silenced, but the vacuum left behind by his bloviating was filled with the pounding of blood in my ears. I had not turned the TV off. The remote still lay where I'd thrown it. It crossed my mind that there might have been a power surge, but my lamp remained glowing, as did the red power indicator at the bottom of the TV's bezel. With a shaky hand, I raised my beer to my mouth, hoping the cold alcohol would be enough to drain away the tightness forming in my throat. When that didn't work, I set the beer down on my bedside table. I squeezed the UFO stress ball like my life depended on it. When I bought it, I had no idea how practical a purchase it was. My free hand reached out for the TV remote. As my fingers brushed the gray plastic, before I'd had the chance to push the power, the dead screen leapt back to life, a crowd of worshippers loudly applauding the great works of the man on screen. Jesus, was it that loud before it went off? I turned the volume down. It was a balancing act. Loud enough to cover up the ragged, anxious breaths I drew, but quiet enough that if there was someone outside, I'd still hear. I gingerly placed the remote back on the bed, like moving it too quickly would spike the volume or kill the power once more. I could have stared at the TV, could have watched the preacher continue to cure his congregation. In retrospect, I should have. Instead, I turned to look at the window again. Through the glass was nothing but the sunless expanse of the parking lot. Yet, a silhouette of a man stood there all the same. Rather, I saw the silhouette of a man. The way you see stars dancing across the backs of your eyelids when you push your thumbs into your sockets. It was indistinct. Something I could not draw on a paper and which I am certain I could not catch on film. But it was the silhouette of a man nonetheless. Then it was gone. I blinked, trying to recapture what I had just seen. My brain was still processing where the man had gone. If there had been a man outside my window, then certainly he must have gone somewhere. Logically, he must have walked, ran, something, or still be standing there. Eyes still locked to the window, I grasped for the room phone. I broke my single-player staring contest long enough to look down and punch in the code for the front desk, before refocusing on the darkness. The phone rang 3 times, then the line clicked off. Swallowing hard, I redialed only to be met with the same thing. The 3rd time it didn't even ring once, clicking off as soon as I'd punched in the numbers. I hung up the phone, glancing at the snarling plastic alien on the wall. It felt less charming now. I hadn't seen anything in the darkness for a few minutes at this point, and my heart rate had dropped back down to a level sure to burn less calories. Part of me was starting to believe I'd been imagining the whole thing. After all, I hadn't come down to New Mexico in the best state of mind. I was fairly confident that hallucination wasn't typically one of the 5 stages of grief, but hey, everyone's different. I rose to my feet, tossing the stress UFO I'd reduced to a pancake onto the bed behind me. I had nearly forgotten I was holding it. I walked slowly to the window. If someone was out there, this would be my chance to get a good look at them. If no one was, then I could rest easy. As I crept towards the glass, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. It was dark, save for the delicate light of the motel's main signpost. I scanned the nearby parking spaces, empty as they'd been when I arrived, except over by the reception area was someone trying to get in? It was hard to tell. The reception area was poorly lit, and if there was a figure there, they were nearly impossible to focus on. No matter how I scrunched and contorted my face, I couldn't get a good look. Maybe it was the alcohol that emboldened me. Maybe it was a genuine curiosity. Maybe it was a repressed death wish. I couldn't tell you what it was for sure, but the fact is that now that the threat wasn't in my immediate area, I wanted to get a better look. I opened my room door and leaned out into the night. I still couldn't see. I leaned a little further out. I stumbled. My room door clicked shut behind me. I spun around, but it was too late. It was shut tight. I knew it was locked from the moment I heard it close, but that didn't stop me from grabbing the handle and doing my best to tear the thing back open. No dice. Well, fuck. I turned back toward reception. At least out here in the night air, I could see once and for all that there was no figure trying to bust in. Clearly the result of an overactive imagination. In fact, though I felt nauseated at the thought, reception was exactly where a foolish, locked-out woman was going to have to go. I was walking before I could think about it too long. Apprehensive as I was, actually arriving at reception was a relief. There was no one standing out there. I grabbed the handle and pulled. The door didn't open. I squinted and looked through the glass of the building. Not Nick Cage wasn't there, nor was the son he had mentioned. The reception desk was entirely empty. Wondering if they were in another room, I banged on the window. "Hey, anyone in there? Could use a bit of help out here." No answer. The apprehension was back. There was no one out in the parking lot, which was good, but there was also no one in the building, which was very bad. There was no way for me to get back into my room without them. Tears started welling up in the corners of my eyes. This was stupid. I was an idiot for going outside, and I was an idiot for coming down to New Mexico in the first place. What the hell was I expecting to happen? I rubbed my eyes to get rid of the moisture. I pulled my bald fist away from my face and blinked, uncomprehending. Where the reception building had stood moments ago, there was nothing but blackness. I rubbed my eyes a second time, hoping that I was misunderstanding what I was seeing. I was not. There was nothing there. I spun around towards the parking lot, rather, to where the parking lot had once been. Stretching out around me in every direction was nothing but dark scrubland. It was difficult to tell what I was looking at. My only light sources were the celestial bodies hanging high above me, painting the land below with a faint glow. I scanned the horizon in all directions and I found nothing. I thought maybe I'd somehow managed to walk in the wrong direction, but I hadn't. The motel wasn't visible in any direction. Surely, were I anywhere near it, I would still see its glowing sign? As my pulse quickened, a thought popped into my mind. I don't know why I'm here. It was my thought, but it felt wrong. Like when an audio drama recasts one of the actors and expects you not to notice. The slightest quality of inaccuracy dripped off of every word. It was in my head, but I felt like I hadn't been the one to think it. I don't know why I'm here. I didn't know why I was here. I didn't know why I was in the middle of the desert when I had simply been trying to visit reception. Why was I trying to go to reception again? I don't know why I'm here. It felt more like me this time. I was getting used to the thought because of how true it was and how right it felt to think it. Why was I here in New Mexico? Why was I here in the middle of the desert, on my knees, in the dirt? Wait, no. I knew the answer to that one. I thought I saw someone, didn't I? I thought I saw someone outside my window. I thought I saw someone outside reception. I thought that there was no one out here. There was no one out there. There had never been anyone out there, had there? I thought I'd seen someone. I'd gone to see if there was someone out there, but there was no one. And there had never been someone. There was no one out here. As I turned my face skyward, tears were once again welling up in my eyes. There had never been anyone out here, but God, did I wish there was. Staring up into the dark blanket of night above me, watching the stars glimmer, I knew I was alone. There is no one out here. The hours crawled by, and I stayed exactly where I was. Where was there to go? The motel, had such a thing ever existed, was too far away for me to see, and I hadn't the slightest idea which direction to walk to find it, or anything else. I stayed on my knees, digging my nails into the earth below me, and it was still. Someday the sun began to rise. I watched as it began to show from behind the horizon line, shining bright and burning my eyes and skin as it raised itself from the ground. Was anyone else watching the sunrise? Ma'am? I turned my head, my neck aching. When had the last time been that I'd moved it? A man stood behind me. He was next to his car in the motel parking lot. I said nothing. My gaze crawled over the man, the car, the parking lot, The motel. "What are you doing out here, hun?" My words felt like dust, ancient, unwanted. "I thought I saw someone out here." The man, his car bearing out-of-state plates, looked out to the desert. He squinted. "Trust me, there ain't nobody out there." A shower, a tea, and I was checked out of the motel. I found I wasn't hungry. I was too nauseated. I was on my way back to Canada the same day. My parents were thrilled to have me back. I was not thrilled to go, but I had no idea what else to do. So I moved into my childhood bedroom, still adorned with plush toys, a tiny desk that I'd outgrown a decade ago, and bright pink curtains drawn over a second-floor window with a clear view out the backyard. I don't know how to explain what happened to me in New Mexico. I tried at first to figure out how to describe that night, and how it had stretched out into eternity. But my head aches when I dwell on it for more than a few minutes at a time. All I do know is, when I look out my bedroom window at night, I can see the clear sky above me. And when I look at those stars in the blank void they call their home, I know there is nobody out there. I know it with a certainty I cannot overstate. Just as I know that I am alive, that I know my own name, that I know my own age, I know that there is nobody out there. That scares me more than anything else.